What's up guys, and welcome to another Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be recreating this render. It's really easy to make and I'm going to show you exactly how it's done. If you find value in my work, please also consider supporting me on Patreon. It's the best way to directly support me and it helps me make this my full-time job. So without further ado, let's get on with it. We've got an empty scene. First thing I'm going to do, of course, is delete the default cube. Hit Shift A, add a mesh, and we'll add a cylinder. We're going to leave the vertices as it is, leave it at 32. And obviously we're making a tunnel, so we're going to delete those faces. So go to face select in edit mode, delete the face here, and delete the face here. In edit modes, we're going to hit A on the keyboard. I'm going to hit RX90, so we can rotate it so it's going down the y-axis. We'll hit SY8. If you notice in the design, you may not be able to notice it, but it's quite blocky. Sort of looks a bit glitchy in a way, but not. And the way I did that is by using a modifier that not many people use it, but not, there's a specific function in this modifier that I think it gets forgotten about, but it can give you some interesting results. We're going to use the remesh modifier. Now what this modifier is usually for is for, well, it's in the name, you remesh your objects. So say you've got bad topology. A lot of the time when you import like vector graphics like SVG files or text into Blender, the topology will be really bad. So you can use the remesh to it basically calculates a new way of forming the topology around the object. But it's also got this really cool block function, which basically turns everything into blocks. Kind of like Minecraft, do you know what I mean? We're going to pump that up to 8. And now you can see it's sort of like blockified our tunnel, sort of made it look like a Lego piece. What you'll notice is it's brought the faces back. So we need to delete those again. The only way to do that is to actually apply the modifier. So make sure you're happy with your settings here. If you're just going to follow along with me, just do what I do. I guarantee you it's going to look good with this. So just leave it at 8 and just leave the scale at 0.9. And we're going to hit Control A on the remesh. Now, when we go into edit mode, you see it's obviously added all of this new topology around the object. We're going to delete those faces again. So go into edit modes. We're going to hit 1 on the number pad keyboard. Just select all of these. Make sure you're on face select still. Control 1, which will flip it round to the back. We'll do that again, but we'll hold shift. We're going to just delete all those faces again. So X, delete faces. And now we've got our blocky tunnel. Now we're just going to basically instance these tunnels down the y-axis. I had a comment on my video today saying to use the array modifier rather than instancing. You can do that. It's just up to preference, really. I have my own preference. I prefer to instance, but you can use the array modifier as well. It's a quicker way of doing it if you want to do it that way. So you just change the factor on the X to 0, and you change the factor on the Y to 1, and then you can pump it up like that. You can do it like that. I prefer to instance because just deleting that array modifier. I like to have everything organized into collections so I can drag and drop objects into the instances so that they automatically populate. Now, you can kind of do that with array modifiers as well. You can just link the modifiers, copy modifiers, but it's just how you prefer to work. That's just how I prefer to work. It's up to you, really. But one thing I would say, you can't use array modifiers on lights. See, there's no option to apply modifiers on lights. So if you had a long tunnel and you wanted to populate lights across the tunnel, instancing, you're going to have no trouble doing that. Just create that instance. So click on the tunnel, hit M, add a new collection, and we'll call that tunnel. I'm going to call this thing tunnel as well. And then I'm going to hit Shift A, add a collection instance, tunnel, and we'll hit GY16, Shift D, Y16, just to duplicate that. And then hit Shift R, Shift R. Just keep hitting Shift R so you get loads of them. Populate all the way down there up until your camera can't see anymore. I like to keep things organized, so I'm going to put these into their own collection. New collection, we'll call that instance. And then we can just hide these. All right, next step. Click on the camera, we're going to hit Alt-G to reset the location, Alt-R to reset the rotation, and then we'll hit RX90 so we can face it down the y-axis, and then we're going to hit GY-8. The camera starts precisely where the tunnel starts. See that origin point there? That's where the camera is. Now we're just going to quickly key in an animation for this camera. So I'm going to drag my timeline up a bit. I'm going to go to the scene settings here, change the frame rate to 30 frames per second, just because the content I make is for like clubs and like festival screens and for VJs. Higher frame rate, the better, really, for that kind of stuff. Basically, they want to be able to control the speed of them. If you render at a low frame rate, there's not really much they can do in terms of slowing it down, because it's just going to get choppy. 60 frames per second is good. 120 frames per second if you really want to be like extra, but I think 60 frames per second is probably the best. The only thing with like a lot of social media platforms, you can't upload at 60 frames per second, so you end up having to reduce the frame rate if you got to upload to like Instagram or something like that. Insta, I think, caps at 30 frames per second. I think TikTok's the only one that you can upload at 60. With that, let's animate that camera. I want it to be a 10-second loop, so that's going to be 300. And I'm going to animate this camera. So I'm going to go to the first frame, add a keyframe on your camera. That camera's set to -8 on the y-axis where the tunnel starts. We're going to go to 301. I'm going to type in 8, but I want it to be double the length. So I'm going to do 8 plus 16. If your arithmetic is good, you'll know that's 24, but mine's terrible. So yeah, and then just add a keyframe and hit A, T, and linear. And you can see that camera now ends at the end point of the second tunnel, right? So it's just going to allow the camera to pass a little bit faster than it would have if it was only going to the first one. It would have looked really slow if we did it like that. So you want to have your mouse hovered in the timeline, and we just want to set the interpolation to linear. So hit A, T, change that to linear. And what that does is it prevents the camera from accelerating and decelerating as it comes to the end. So you can have a constant motion going through the tunnel. Next step, we want to create that spiral effect you're seeing here. How do we do that? I don't think I've seen people use this technique before, so you might learn something new with this. We're going to be using a modifier called the simple deform modifier. I'll show you what it does on this. So we're going to add it onto the tunnel. The simple deform modifier basically allows you to twist an object like so. Yeah, it has different sort of ways it works, and you can get some really cool effects with this, by the way, and you can animate all of this as well, so you can get some really cool effects doing this. But the one we want is twist, just so we can get that sort of spirally corkscrew effect. So that's what that does. But what you might not know about it is it twists from the origin point of the object. So for example, if I take this tunnel and I go into edit mode and I hit G and X, if I start to move that, it's going to twist from that orange dot there, but we're not going to do it on this, so I'm just going to delete that. We're going to do it on a new object, so we're going to hit Shift A, add a mesh, and we'll add a cylinder. We want to give this quite high resolution, so there's no noticeable like faces on the object. We want it to look quite smooth, so I'm going to go to the vertices and I'm going to give it 128 vertices. It's nice and smooth. We also need to delete the faces as well, so I'm just going to move this over here for now. So I'm going to go into edit mode, just delete that face again. X delete, hit Alt G just to reset it into the center. I'm going to hit RX90, SY8, and we're going to apply all transforms. So Control A, apply all transforms, go back into edit modes, and we're going to hit A, so we select everything, and we're going to hit S, Shift Y, so that you lock in the Y axis. Now when we scale it, it's only going to scale on the X and the Z axis, so it's going to bring it in without affecting the endpoints of the cylinder. So yeah, S, Shift Y, bring that in, just make it quite small, staying in edit mode, because remember we want to keep that origin point in the center. We're going to hit G, X, and just bring it around here. Now all you got to do is go to your modifier, come out of edit mode, go to your modifier, and we're going to add that simple deform, and it's going to work like magic. Pop that there, change the axis to Y. You can see it's not having any effects. What you may have noticed is that I forgot to I gave resolution to the surface of the object, but I haven't given any cuts along the length. So I need to just bring this out again, and I'm going to go into top view, and I'm going to go into edit mode again, delete this modifier for now, and I'm going to go to loop cut here, and we're going to add 128 cuts, and then we're just going to click in the center here. It's going to give you 128 cuts down the length of the cylinder now. Select that, make sure you come back to box select, because it's easy to forget that you have that tool on when you go back into edit mode, and you might end up cutting some objects that you edit in. So come out of edit mode and hit Alt G, and now let's go into our camera mode. Go into our camera by hitting 0, and we're going to go to the modifier again, and we're going to add that again. So simple deform, and you want it down the y-axis. And now when you pump this up, you're going to see it corkscrewing round. And now when we hit play, you can see what I mean. And now all you got to do is drag that cylinder into the tunnel instance, and it's going to populate the whole thing. And that's how you create spirals. Now I'll just shade it smooth as well. So you can right click it, shade smooth, or go to object and shade smooth. I think it's here. One thing noting as well, I know I deleted the modifier before. You can just hide it by doing that. I don't know why I didn't do that, but so I just want to widen up that focal length a bit as well. So I'm going to bring this down probably around here, 13. I'm going to change that name to spiral. And if you want to adjust the size of the spiral, again, you need to go into edit mode to do that and do the S Shift Y thing if you want to play around with the thickness of it. Because if you don't do it in edit modes, you're going to do that, and you don't want to do that because it's not going to join. I always like to save my work before I start shading. I just think it's a good checkpoint. You should save often though, really, because Blender can just crash randomly. So we got that saved. Let's go into rendered mode now. In case you missed that, I hit Z and then 8 to go into rendered mode. Go to the world settings. This is basically an add-on I bought, so don't worry about that. We're gonna drop that down to black. Take that light. We're just gonna use the light that it provides us, and we're gonna hit Alt G just to bring it into the center. And what I'm gonna do is parent the light to the camera so that the light follows the path. Click on your light, click on your camera while holding Control, and then hit Control P, Object Keep Transform, and there you go. Now your light is following down the path. If you can't find your light, it's just under this menu here. It's created like a sub folder that you need to expand. So we're just gonna duplicate that light. So hit Shift D. This second light is still gonna be parented to the camera, which is what we want. And with your first frame at 1, we're gonna change the light to 32 on the Y-axis in your transform settings, just so it's like right at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, so now we've got 2 lights, and we're going to play around with these a bit later. So let's just go to our render settings here. We're going to be using Evee. We all love Evee because it's quick. And we're going to check bloom. I like to drop the intensity a bit. I find the Evee bloom a bit strong, and we're going to add the screen space reflections, and we're going to add motion blur as well. So that's still looking pretty bad, so we need to start shading the tunnel. So we're going to click on this tunnel here. I'm going to add a new material and go over here, add a new material. If you can't see this window, all you need to do is just go to the top right corner and just drag it in, go to shader editor, and that's going to allow you to mess around with the material properties in a node based setting. We've got the principal BSDF shader, so we're going to bring this down on the color, just make it quite dark, and we're going to drop the roughness all the way down. And you're going to see these lights here. You can see them reflecting on the surface of the tunnel, and that's basically the magic of screen space reflections. Obviously, when you turn that off, it's giving you a lot more detail when you drop the roughness down. So if you see on my render, the lights are like sort of twisting as they go down. And honestly, it's really easy to do that. All you got to do is just add that simple deform that we added on the spiral. We're just going to add it to the tunnel again. So go to your modifier settings, go to simple deform, and then go down the Y-axis, and we're going to bring this in the negatives. I want it to go in the opposite direction of the spiral. I mean, you can do what you can have it going with. I quite like it going the other way. It's created movement on the lighting, which I find really cool. Cool. So next step, let's pump that metallic all the way up, add a bit of color to it. So on the base color of your tunnel, we're going to bring this to maybe like a deep green, I think. If you click on your first light, this is the one that's closest to us. You can always readjust that on the Y if you want. You can even animate this to go through. You could instance it if you want. If you want extra brownie points, you could instance this, and you could have an infinite path of lights that come through. Yeah, that's why I like instancing, because yeah, you just drag a few things in the instance and you can just sort of play around with the spiral. Let's add some material to the spiral. So click on your spiral, we'll add a new material. Again, we're gonna pump that metallic up, and let's just leave the roughness where it is. Let's change the color to, I think I went for purple, didn't I? Maybe it was blue, I don't know. Obviously, you play around with different color palettes. It's down to you guys to experiment. I always encourage you to just sort of take the techniques you learn from the tutorial and sort of use them to create new things with it. Build and adapt from the knowledge that you get from what you learn. That's the only way you can really create new art. And really nothing is new art. Everyone is inspired by someone. So yeah, don't feel like you're copying my work. I really don't care. Do what you want. That's what I'm saying. But it's good. I think it's good to at least experiment, just play around with it. So we have that other light that's sort of all the way at the end. So we're gonna actually make this a different color. So go to light 0.001, the duplicate light. We're gonna change the color to, we'll make it like a blue, I think, like a light blue. One more thing I will say, with these kind of renders, I like it to really pop. So what you'll notice with this, it's not really popping. And the way I find is like a one button trick to make your renders pop is just to change the color management settings. So if you go to render properties, go down to color management, go to look, change that to very high contrast, and it will make things just pop a lot more. You can also play around with the exposure settings and the gamma settings, but I'm going to leave them where they are for now. Now, I think it's just a case of getting these reflections just to come through a bit more. So maybe we'll bring that up and just play around with these colors, I think, till we get something that we like. I think maybe bring the light in a bit as well. So I think it's a bit too far out. You can also change the radius and get some cool effects here by pumping up the light radius. And that's something you can animate as well, get some cool effects. I did it with this one. Yeah, I was just, see that, it sort of flowers out. That's just me animating the radius of the light. So yeah, fuck it, let's do that. We're gonna animate that. So we're gonna put that on 0.1, add a keyframe on the first frame, go to 301 and add the same keyframe. We're gonna go to frame 151, which is the center. I'm just gonna pump that up to about here. 1.15 is probably good. Now by default, Blender has the interpolation set to Bezier. If you haven't messed around with that, then you don't need to change this, but if not, just in case, hit A, T, and change that to Bezier. This just makes sure that as the animation plays through, it just makes sure that these are gonna sort of ease in and out rather than sort of be janky. It's hard to explain without showing you. That's pretty much all it is, man. It's just a case of experimenting with the settings a bit more. So I'm gonna change that light again. I'm gonna change the backlight, the one that's right at the end. I'm just gonna bring that radius up a bit so you can sort of see it cutting through a bit more. You can see on my one, it was all mirrored. Honestly, it's really easy. All you need to do is add a mirror modifier to the spiral. So we're just gonna click on our spiral here, go to modify properties, add a modifier, add a mirror modifier, and yeah, just put that on all of them, and there you go. That's how you get that mirror effect. Check bisect as well if you want them to sort of cut into each other. Gives you this sort of cool creation effect in the spiral. Sort of looks like an eye as well that you sort of pass through. If you want to get a really cool pattern on this spiral, you'll notice that the mirror modifier isn't really working on the Z-axis how we'd like it to. All you got to do to fix that is just go into edit mode, hit A, and then hit G and then Z, and you're going to see we're starting to see that take effect now. So just bring it down a touch, not too much, just a little bit, and now add all of your axes. Now you can see we've got this really cool pattern here. One more thing as well you can do if you want symmetry across it, because obviously the spiral tunnel, it's not symmetrical, so you could, with this simple deform, just add the mirror modifier below it, and it's gonna create some really cool geometry, I reckon. Yeah, look at that. It gives you some really nice patterns. The only problem is when I brought that down, getting a bit of intersection here. I'm gonna hit GZ, just bring it in a little bit more, and there we go. Bit more shading, so just play around with these a bit more till I get it to look how I want it. I think I'm gonna go with a different color palette. I'm gonna bring this in a little bit as well, I think. Bring that here. I like this being purple, so that will... So I'm just experimenting with the color palette. I don't want the radius that thick actually on the light, so I'm gonna change that. Just bring that down a bit to around here. Just reset those keyframes. And I think that light at the end could be... You can even widen the camera even further if you want. Even a close focal length's pretty cool. That's quite cool. The choices, man. Don't know what to do. Yeah, I don't know. I keep changing my mind. That's cool. I think I'll just leave it like that. All you got to do now is render out the animation. So if you go over here to output properties, just make sure everything's set up how you want it. This output file is obviously where your render's going to go. File format. Best practices to actually render an image sequence. Number one, it will be a bit faster in the sense that you'll get the render quicker because your computer's not encoding at the same time. But then it does add time as well, because you got to then, if you want to actually watch the video, you have to throw it into like an editor or an encoder and then put it all together. So it Actually, it is a bit longer with when you render in image sequences, but the main reason people do it is because if the render crashes for whatever reason, you can basically pick up from where you left off. So say you got to frame 140 and it crashed. With an image sequence, you can just pick up from where you left off. If you render it to a video, if it crashes, that file is going to be corrupt and you're going to have to start from square one. So it's not a big deal if you're doing like 1080p, like 30 frames per second. Not really a big deal if the scene isn't too complex, but if say you like using cycles or you're rendering at like 4K or at 60 frames per second, you're not going to want to start again if it crashes, because it's going to take forever. So that's the best practice, is to do image sequence, but I want to see it now. So yeah, going to change the thing to FFmpeg video, container MP4, output quality perceptually lossless, video codec, just leave that at H.264. And then all you got to do is go to render and render animation and you're done. Right, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and consider following me on Instagram or on Twitter, where I post most of my work. That's @nebmotion. You can also contact me directly through there. If you just want to get in touch, just drop me a DM, or if you have any questions. If you find value in my work, please also consider supporting me on Patreon. It's the best way to directly support me, and it helps me make this my full-time job. Or if you're not interested in committing to a monthly subscription, feel free to browse my website where you can find more of my work. A purchase of one of my renders comes with a Blender project file, so if you see something that you like and you want to know how I made it, you can purchase the files through there. Just another way of supporting me if you enjoy my work. And you can find all of that at nebmotion.co.uk.